Back in 2019, 2020, I started as a police officer in 2004. So going through the right before 2020, I saw a lot of issues throughout the nation where police officers weren't trained well enough to control suspects, control individuals, and I think they were escalating to use of force maybe before they needed to. And really, it's no fault of their own. They just weren't trained to that level. And Jiu-Jitsu has been around for a while, and law enforcement, it just hasn't been very widespread. So I made a decision to start training on my own and trying to bring that more to this area as a control tactic when dealing with suspects or individuals that maybe need to be restrained as law enforcement. So I wanted to start training so I could start doing this more while on duty, and hopefully bring it to my department and continue to train that.
And you were one of the first individuals that I'm aware of and you actually introduced me to the Adopt a Cop program. Speak a little bit about that program and how you came across their organization.
Adopt a Cop's a non-for-profit that came across, about the time I started, about 2020. Is when they began. I came across that. Mitch Aguilar, who is a retired Navy SEAL. I followed him on Instagram. He's an MMA fighter. He's got several professional fights under his belt, as well as being a Jiu-Jitsu black belt. So he saw the same problem I was having around the same time. I mean, he probably identified it before. He doesn't work in law enforcement, but obviously he was a career Navy SEAL and came out and wanted to assist. So around the same time that I identified some of the problems that I wanted to address personally as a law enforcement officer, I saw him trying to come across saying, "Hey, I'll start paying for all police officers to learn Jiu-Jitsu." He goes, "I think all Jiu-Jitsu or all police officers throughout the country should be at least a blue belt." And I think that would give them, or he said that would give them the ability to control suspects in a way that's better. It just was the same way for too long in law enforcement. So he wanted to start, he just basically said, "Hey, I want to start this thing, who's interested?" I reached out and said, "I'm absolutely interested." And from what I know, I was the second individual in the country that was selected for the Adopt a Cop program. I remember coming into you and kind of saying I wanted to do this, and explained the process, and Mitch was great. I remember him, I was so early in the program, I remember sitting in your office with you on the phone with him giving you credit card information, and just paying, saying, "Get this guy going." And now I think there's over 2,000 or 3,000 individuals on the Adopt a Cop program. I know there's a waiting list for law enforcement. It currently pays up through your blue belt. And once you're blue belt, you're Adopt a Cop graduate, and it's affected a lot of police officers, a lot of agencies throughout the country, and I'm obviously a big fan of it.
Now, before you came to the school to train Jiu-Jitsu, you've obviously been working out. How has your performance at work changed since you've added Jiu-Jitsu? What have you seen physically and mentally?
The first thing that Jiu-Jitsu that I noticed being a police officer is I started training when I probably had about 15, 16 years on. And once I started training Jiu-Jitsu, it became very apparent that I was woefully underprepared to physically restrain individuals up to that point. And when I go through an entire career, most of my career, without that confidence, that was really eye-opening. Law enforcement did train different control tactics, but a lot of it was pressure points and things like that. They didn't talk about mount. They didn't talk about mount escapes. They didn't talk about some of the main things we need to do to control a suspect. And then the confidence that you get as a law enforcement officer. It's stressful enough to be working midnights, but to have that false sense of security out there because you go through a training and then they bless you as able to handle yourself. There's no police officer in the country should be training to the level of only the department at this point. I just think if you're serious about what you're doing, especially when it comes to control tactics or jiu-jitsu or being able to handle yourself or just officer safety in general or public safety for that matter, you have to learn jiu-jitsu, and it takes a long time, and it's not easy to feel comfortable. And then the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. But I do agree with Mitch, and I think that every law enforcement officer should at least be striving to get that blue belt. And once they do that, you have that confidence, just like kind of I felt the confidence. Not that I'm a world beater or anything like that, but I just feel I can control a situation until assistance arrives.
What advice would you give to a police officer coming in to a jiu-jitsu school for the first time and having to train with people who have a lot of experience on the mats, and what that could do to their ego?
Yeah, and I think it's the best thing you can do. A lot of police officers might come in, especially younger officers, probably myself included 20 years ago, might come in and decide or feel that maybe they don't want to be stepping on the mats for any type of reason. I'm a big, I've seen you post this several times. I have this up in my office at work, that if it's important, you'll find a way. If not, you'll find an excuse. I really kind of live by that, and I think every police officer should, especially when it comes to training. So you can find every excuse in the world not to get on the mat with somebody, but even if someone's been training for 3 months and you've been a police officer for 15 years, they're going to show you some things that you didn't know. And we should be throwing ourselves in the fire like that in order to understand what we may be dealing with out in the public, because we don't just get to tap. You know, we have to go home at night. We have to be able to control that suspect, and for the sake of the community as well. I mean, we owe it to the community to be able to handle ourselves in a way that doesn't escalate a use of force to the point where people are getting injured. So I would tell them to check the ego. I would encourage every police officer who starts, especially now, to get out here and see what you don't know a lot earlier than I did. And I think that I think as an overall, for a career, for confidence, for just being humble, I think that's really where it needs to be. And I think that that's probably the biggest thing, is letting police officers check their ego at the door when it comes into jiu-jitsu school, walk into frequency, slap bump, and go ahead and get out there and try to and try to improve yourself, which is something I know you preach a lot. Is it's not about winning, it's about improving. And sometimes it takes a while for individuals, depending on how they've been brought up, competitively. But you're not going to win, and you're not going to win a lot. And I think that's a good lesson for really anybody.